All right, well, it's time to get back onto this thing, and hopefully this will be our final episode for at least this round of modification. So after this, we should have it back up and running and at least get some test drives in before we decide what we're going to change. So at the end of the last episode, I had pretty much put everything together suspension-wise. I was thinking that I was going to have to do a little work on the drive shaft up front to get enough angle out of it to clear, but it turns out that the way these links move, the pinion actually rotates up as it droops out, so that's giving me plenty of room. No binding in that drive shaft at all, and we're sitting at full droop right now, so we'll just check that one off the list and call it an easy win. The other thing we got to do is get an exhaust in here, which with the upper link up here now, a little light in there, see there's not a whole lot of room to fit anything in here between the drive shaft and the link bracket, so I'm going to have to get a little creative there. I think the crossover tube's going to probably still come over here and go under the drive shaft. I don't think I've got enough room to go that way, especially when this thing comes up to full compression. It's going to be up into here somewhere, and there's just not room for that. So I'm still going to have to probably follow along as close under this cross member as I can, turn and go up and back over it. So that's where we're going to start at. And I think I need to get this cut coming out of the cat cleaned up a little bit. Turns out when I was just hacking away with it with a Sawzall, it didn't come out real square, so I'll have to square that up. And yeah, I think that's where I'm going to start. So in order to try to get this cut as square as possible, I just put a hose clamp on there, got it pretty well straight, and that'll work as a good guide. You can see I've got almost nothing there, and I got about 3/8 of an inch over here. So I can mark off that hose clamp. That'll give me a guideline to go off with, and I can get this thing cut back, and I'll at least be starting out square for anything that I'm adding on after this. Just makes life a little easier rather than trying to fight a crooked cut right from the beginning. That multi-tool with the carbide blade on it did a pretty good job of cutting that exhaust off, so it's looking pretty good and square. So I got a place to start off of there. And I also reinstalled this crossover tube from the stock exhaust. So now I just add on to it, pitch the loop under the drive shaft, and head towards the back, and then I'll have to figure out space for that to come through and go back and meet up at the Y somewhere. So start figuring that out. I'm going to use this multi-bend piece to start getting this exhaust figured out. I think first thing I'm going to do is probably cut this bend right here, and that'll give me the curve up under the drive shaft, and then I can make the turn towards the rear out of that as well. Here's my first piece I got cut, so I've got it pretty well fitted up against the original exhaust there, so you can see it just kind of barely clears going around the drive shaft, but that is as close as this should ever get. So everything's at full droop right now, so dropped out as far as it'll ever be. So I've got that pretty well set up, and then I've got this piece that's going to sit on top of that going that way. So I'm going to probably go cut this off somewhere in here and go get that tacked in place so it doesn't move on me. And you see I got that second piece tacked in, so now I've got this run under the drive shaft and over the cross member and back. So now I think I'm going to try and get the driver's side bank put together, at least through this point. See, I don't have a whole lot of room in between the link mount and this tube to fit it through, so it's going to be a little tricky to get it in there, but we'll make it work. I think the first thing I'm going to do is cut this flange off right about here so I can weld that on coming right out of the cat, so I'll still have a bolt together connection there. Should make it easy to deal with. Okay, so I got that flange tacked onto the end of the cat. I also got this piece that I cut off the original Y-pipe, so it's headed in the right general direction. So now I've got just a straight piece of 2" here that I can kind of set up there and get it pointed in the general direction that I want it to be, which is right about there. And I can see I've got, 5/8 of an inch of gap there. So cut a piece that's got about that much bend to it. We'll come over here onto our bent piece, and with it lined up on the edge of the table, I'm going to come in, measure my 5/8 right in that ballpark, make a mark there, and then I'll make a straight mark all the way around it, and I can cut that off, and that should be pretty close. And again, to make sure I've got a mark that goes straight across the way I want it to, I've got this hose clamp on there, so I can now mark that all the way around, and it'll be pretty close to where I want it to be. And I should be able to fit it up and then do a little fine tuning with the sander to make it fit just the way I want it to. Alright, so after a little bit of fine tuning, got a pretty good fit on that. It's coming up right about the same height as the other one, right where I wanted it. So I think I'm going to tack that in and then move on to the next piece. Okay, so I got that piece tacked on, and I also came over and I got another extension onto that tacked on as well. But you can see back up in there how close together they get. And actually, I think they might be touching right now. So to weld this piece here to the one in front of it would be almost impossible with everything in place. So I'm going to pull that chunk out right now, get that welded all the way around, and then I'll put it back in. Alright, so we got this piece all welded up. I went ahead and made this full weld, and then the next one up here. And then I've also got this Y-pipe in place, just got it tacked in now. So now I'm going to take the factory exhaust that would attach here, put it up there, and see how close I came. Alright, so it looks like I came pretty close on my length. I'm going to have to cut probably an inch or so off the Y-pipe. Might have to trim a little bit of the other exhaust going back, but lengthwise we came out pretty good, and I think even height-wise it's working out. Kind of see, I've got a hanger's got to go up about the diameter of the tube, so that should work out pretty well. It's almost like I planned this, which I really didn't, but it's all working out. So I think now I'm going to go ahead and pull this whole assembly out, get it over on the bench, get it welded up. I think I need to pull the drive shaft out to make that happen. But we'll get that out, get that done, then I got to get this welded up, and we're getting really close to done. Alright, so I got this Y-pipe all welded up. I also got the flange fully welded up on the cat, so that's good to go. So now I'm just going to have to cut this off. There's also a little alignment tab right here. I'm going to have to cut that off because that's not going to line up the same place as it used to. But yeah, coming along. When I'm doing exhaust and sheet metal, thin stuff like this, I like to use this welder. It's my old Miller 130. It's a little 110 volt machine. I keep 023 wire in it and 75-25 gas. Works really well for doing thin stuff. You know, it doesn't have the power to do anything too heavy, but it does work really well when you get down into sheet metal. Alright, so here everything is installed back in here. I also have got the, I guess, called an intermediate pipe back on there. I had to do a little cut and bend and re-weld on that to make the angles all line up, but wasn't too bad. So that fit all back in there. So now I'm just waiting for new muffler and tailpipe pieces to show up so I can get those put in. Those should be here the next day or so. So get that done, and then this thing is just about ready to sit back on the ground. Go. I think I've decided, since I'm waiting on exhaust parts, I'm going to go ahead and put this thing back down on the ground, see where it's sitting. I put about, I think, 15 or 20 more PSI in the upper chambers on all of the ORIs, so it should lift things up a little bit more, closer to where it needs to be anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and set it down. Alright, well, we're still sitting a little lower than I want to be, but it's up a bit. Got a little bit more shaft showing in there, but probably do with another 15 or 20 pounds in there, but still got pretty good lowrider status. But the other thing I need to do right now, while I've got it down here too, is I need to bleed the ABS pump. I think that's given me a squishy pedal issue that I've been dealing with, so I'll work on getting that done. Okay, so slight change in plans. The battery on this thing is dead, so it's not allowing me to do the ABS bleed because it keeps popping up with low voltage codes. And so good news is, in the meantime, all the exhaust stuff showed up that I was needing, so I'm going to go ahead and get the muffler and tailpipe stuck in here now, and hopefully by the time I get that done, I'll have a battery for it, and I can get the ABS bled, and then maybe go take this thing for a real test drive. I've got for muffler and tailpipe, so this is basically just a kind of a knockoff MagnaFlow. It's a stainless, straight through, stainless packed, and a couple of 2.5 inch 90-degree mandrel bends. So that should be all I need, except I think there's one little bend that I got to put in it, but should be pretty easy to get put together. Okay, so here's where I've got the exhaust cut off at the rear, just behind the axle. So I've got this little chunk here that should give me enough bend so I can run straight back off of that into one of the 90s into the muffler, and then the other 90 will make a tailpipe. So I'm going to go ahead and get this thing tacked on real quick, and then I can start getting those 90s cut to fit. All right, so I got this 90 trimmed, fitting pretty well. It's kind of how the muffler is going to sit. And so now I've got, coming out the other side, I've got this other 90 that I want it to kind of turn and point back like that. So I'm going to have to trim it off here to basically where the bend is going to be right up against where the outlet of the muffler is, and then we'll angle it back and down, and that should pretty well do it. And this is pretty much what it's going to look like. So I think now I'm going to go ahead and pull the muffler and pipes out, and I'll get those pieces welded together, do it on the bench where it's easy to deal with, and then get it in here and get it welded in. I think this would work out pretty well. It should shoot the exhaust pretty much straight out the back, and it's reasonably well protected up in here. I'm not saying it's never going to get caught on a rock, but you're going to have to try for it. So get that done and get this thing back in and welded up, and then I can see about making some hangers for it. All right, here it is all welded in. It's sitting where it's going to sit. So now I just need to get a hanger in over here. So I think in order to do that, I've got these pieces that came off the original exhaust that should go in something like that. So I'll get those stuck in there, and this thing will be just about wrapped up. So because these hangers are a little short, don't give me a lot to weld to, so you've got it kind of ground down to a point there. I'm going to just weld on some extension onto those, so I've got a little bit more to work with when I go to attach it to the frame and onto the exhaust side. Okay, so I've got the upper mount for that hanger all in and welded to the frame. Kind of got a start of a weld on this lower hanger. So now what I want to do with it is, if you just cut it off like that, that thing's going to break eventually and your exhaust is just going to be dangling. So now I want to take this hanger and wrap it up around the tube so that the tube is actually resting in it and not hanging from the weld. All right, that's pretty well wrapped around there. So now I can come through and weld that up, cut off the end, and we'll be good to go. And there we have it. So that pretty much wraps up this exhaust. I think at some point I'm going to come back in and see if I can get a hanger on this side. It's pretty good the way it is, but I think one more on there would be good. But I don't have any parts for that right now, so I'll have to come back to that later. I think for now, I'm going to lower this thing down a little bit, see if I can jump start it, see what it sounds like. Okay, well that doesn't sound too bad, so it's actually got a little bit of a noise to it now instead of sounding like a minivan. So next thing, like I said, I gotta wait till I get a new battery for this thing and I can get the ABS bled and get all that happening, which I won't be able to record any of that anyway since I have to use the phone that I'm using to record all of this. So it's a little tough to make that do 2 or 3 things at the same time. But anyway, next time you see me driving this, you'll know that all that happened.